And he is. It's Nick Hemond, president of the Providence School Board.
How you doing?
Nice to see you. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it today. Were you chatting with some of the Irish out there?
I was. Very exciting. Good time of year to be Irish.
Good time of year to be Irish. Do you do any of the festivities, the parades, or?
Yeah. I always do the St. Patrick's Day parade on Smith Hill.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to it this year. My son is 10 months old, so the first time we get to bring him for all the festivities. But Patrick's Pub on the day of the St. Patrick's Day parade is a great day to be in Rhode Island. It's a great day to be in the city. Mix that with the NCAA tournament, you have a great weekend.
There's a lot going on right now. Well, we're keeping an eye on God's College this evening with the PC Friars, see how they do. All eyes on basketball. But all eyes, I wanted to bring you in just to talk about Providence schools. And I know there's a meeting taking place tonight about projected deficits and how that's going to impact the schools. And you've been on the school board now for how long?
Just about 6 years now.
Wow, okay.
6 years in September.
Six years. So talk with us, because I wanted to get a sense for viewers and just have that conversation. How dire is the fiscal situation facing the schools, and what are you looking to achieve to be able to address these?
So our fiscal situation it's not, I don't want to say it's dire, but it's certainly serious. And since I've been on the school board, we've been level funded from the city. Mm-hmm. We've thankfully had the increased funding formula from the state that's increased each year, but that's coming to an end in 2018. But the real problem is we've seen federal funding go down by about $55 million. So that's presented a lot of challenges. The other piece that's very challenging for us is when we want to do something new, when we want to save money, when we want to do anything like that, we have to get 100% of those dollars from 2% of our budget. 98% of our budget is essentially fixed. Okay. Whether it's 78, 79% of that is salary and wages, which you only get to really look at once every 3 years. Yep. But whether it's National Grid and Sodexo and things like that, 98% of our costs are essentially fixed. So it's very tough to do new programs and to expand what you're doing when you have such a small pool of your overall budget to get those funding sources from. So
talk to us about priorities. Again, there's only so much money to go around. You're talking about looking at that 2% to go to be able to pull from. Obviously can't do everything. Mm-hmm. So where are the priorities and what might have to be looked at a little further down the road just because of the fiscal realities right now?
Well, before getting into the educational piece, to me, number one priority has to be our buildings themselves. Mm-hmm. We have a $750 million ongoing maintenance problem in the school system. Some of our buildings are in very good shape. I happen to go to the dual language program at Levittown, which is a newer building, beautiful. But you look at Classical High School, you look at some of our older buildings, Broad Street Elementary School is our oldest school. These buildings are in dire need of improvement. And you want to have schools that the kids are proud to go to, that the teachers are proud to work in. And I would point to Central High School. In the mid-2000s, 2005, 2007, in that time, the city put a lot of money into redoing Central High School. And I contend that it's been part of the catalyst of changing the culture and climate at Central High School. Mm-hmm. And it's been well maintained. It still looks good 10 years later. And they've rode the wave in what they've done there, and they've really improved everything about that building. To now there's actually a wait list for people who want to go to Central High School. But I think programmatically, it's the English language learners. Almost a third of our population in Providence are English language learners, meaning that English is not their first language, and they're coming to us, and we have to bring them up to speed. With the refugee crisis going on in the world, we've also seen this rapid influx of people who are coming to our school district from kindergarten to high school that have no formal education whatsoever. We call them newcomers, and that's another priority of ours, is how to accommodate that. So we're in the process of opening up another building to try to triage the newcomers as they come into the district, to get them up to speed so that they'll be ready to go into a traditional classroom.
When you talk about that building, talk with us a little bit about that. So that's specifically sort of a school for the newcomers?
Yeah.
Is it K-12? Is it a certain age range? What does that look like?
So I'll give you an example in terms of the volume. 4 years ago, 4 years ago, we had like 45 that would be in this newcomer. Mm-hmm. Last year we had 215.
Wow.
In November of this year, we already had 145. So it does the children an injustice to just place them into an ELL class, because they've never taken step one. And so Rather than do that, we've identified this as a better system to meet every student where they are when they come to us, get them to grade level or some level of proficiency, and then we know better to place them at a particular grade level or a particular program, identify the specific needs that they have. You can't just do this one-size-fits-all model of education anymore. It just doesn't work that way.
So how does this look from kind of a nuts and bolts perspective? I mean, costs associated with it, time frame. I mean, how does this go through the process from a conception to a reality?
So thankfully, the legislature provided us with some increased funding last year, specifically for English language learners, which has not traditionally been part of the funding formula. To me, it should be, because of the fact that it's no secret that educating special education students, educating the English language learner students, are more costly than your traditional populations. So we've been able to have some extra funding. We were able to secure a building that the city owns. Everybody working together, and it's going to become a reality at some point this year. And
some point this year. Okay. Where's the building located?
I believe it's on the south side. I'm not sure of the exact address.
Okay, so there's already an existing city structure, got some additional funding for ELL. Looks like that's going to be a go. Yeah. And then going back to the infrastructure side of things, you talk about addressing the needs and the issues at Central High School. How much of this is this mostly state money? I mean, what's the breakdown between state, city, and federal? And you talk about the loss of federal funding. What's generally to do the infrastructure costs?
Well, the infrastructure is actually beautiful for the city because we get reimbursed 80% of the money. So if we spend $100 million on doing a renovation, we get 80% of that back. The challenge is that we have to bond that money. Mm-hmm. And when we've tried to do that, we tried to convince Mayor Tavares to do a $50 million bond, and we get 80% of it back. The city didn't want to do it at the time because they wanted to get more police cars and a couple of new fire engines and do other things. And so the city has a limited bonding capacity. Mm-hmm. If we can figure out how to perhaps flip that around, where the city would reimburse 20% to the state, then it would be easier for us to be able to do it because the state does have a greater capacity. And that goes across all districts. Now, they don't all get 80%. It's kind of unique to the economic conditions of the population of your schools. But every city or town gets reimbursed from the state through that funding formula process.
And how do you go about triaging and deciding which schools have? Is there a mechanism that you say, because you hear all the times from the leaking ceilings, and every school seems to have some really difficult infrastructure needs. How do you decide who gets addressed first and how? So,
what we've done is we've spent $10 million a year the last couple of years, probably the last 3 years, in doing leaky ceilings, leaky roofs, trying to update boilers. We've updated fire code in most places. We've updated sprinkler systems. But what you're supposed to do to be eligible for the 80% is you have to come up with a 5-year master plan for building facilities and maintenance. Okay. And then that would get submitted to the Rhode Island Department of Education. They would review it, and then they approve it or change it or modify it or reject it. It's not like they just write the check, so it has to be done in an organized fashion. Yes. But we can't do it in this piecemeal fashion because part of what they look at is, if I want to go into a school building, say Harry Kazarian School, and I want to replace the roof. But 2 years prior, we just did a bunch of sprinkler work and replaced the ceiling. RIDE looks at that and says, well, you just fixed the ceiling. Now we're going to tear it down 2 years later, and you're going to put a new one in. So you can't do this piecemeal. It has to be this all-encompassing plan. Otherwise, the state won't do it. They're not fools up there. They know what they're doing. It may come as a surprise to some people, but that particular division knows what it's doing and tries to look at these things in a comprehensive nature.
So who puts forth the application? Is that done at the school level? Is that done at the district level? If King decides we want to put forth a 5-year plan, who do they do that with?
No, it has to be from the school department and from the city. So the times that, since I've been the chairman, I've signed off on, I think, 2 of them. Okay. And it was my signature. It was either the chief financial officer or the chief operating officer of the city. So it really is a school department, city function to put forward. Individual buildings, maybe they could, but my understanding of it is that
goes through you. And you said you've worked on 2. Have you been approached by more that you haven't been able to get it to that level, or was it I clearly identified as these are the schools? Yes, we need to support.
If you think back to when Michael Solomon was the council president, he proposed a $250 million school renovation and redevelopment program. That I was very supportive of that idea, and partly because you get the 80% back. The longer we wait, the worse this is getting. When I tell you it's 750,000, that's the number that I have from 3 years ago. And I can tell you it hasn't gotten better. But we've taken measures to make the schools warm, safe, and dry, as they like to say, to make sure that there's, the buckets aren't pouring down on people. But you've seen Martin Luther King. My understanding is that process will be taken care of over the summer, that we will repair. I mean, it's been well documented on social media, the leaky buckets.
Yes.
Unfortunately, not something you can do while the students are there, but we've got some stopgap measures to address that. And then over the summer, public property will get in there and fix the leaks.
So we've talked about the ELL building, we've talked about infrastructure. What else are sort of your goals this year on the school board to achieve? I mean, obviously addressing budgetary needs is that's the elephant in the room. But if you were to say, this is my goal sheet for 2017.
Sure. I think what we've done as a board, aside from a couple of members of the board, for the most part, we're not educators. I'm an attorney. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a principal. And we all bring different perspectives and to the board. And so what I've tried to do since becoming chairman 2 years ago is to make us more involved in the community, make us more accessible to the community. So we've divided the schools evenly, for the most part, among the 9 members of the board. So each board is a contact person for 4 or 5 schools.
Okay.
We've taken the board meetings on the road. We've met in every school that we can. They're not all compliant with the handicap accessibility that you have to have in order to have an open meeting. So we can't go to every, but we've taken the boards to all the available spaces to get out and see the schools. And try to be interactive with the PTOs, to hear directly from the people that are affected by what's happening in the school system. We've spent a lot of time advocating at the state level on, a broken record, but English language learners. I mean, it really is the changing of our school district. And when I got on the board in the beginning, I think we were at 18%. Now we're up 25 to 33. And obviously, we always want to be improving our test scores. The interesting thing, and hopefully it's accurate information, but I was speaking with the superintendent, talking about test scores, talking about what we need to do to address them. And interesting statistic, we looked at progression year on year of different students. And we have 25,000 students in our district. This only included 15,000 kids. So where's the other 10,000? They're not with us for 2 testing years. So our population is constantly changing.
Yes. And talk to us, let's maybe tack federally, new Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. How do you see that, if at all, impacting right here in Providence?
Well, that's another thing we're watching very closely. We still get a substantial portion of federal funding. I think we're at $29 million in federal funding. It was at $70, $80 million when I first got on. We're watching very closely to ensure that she doesn't take that $28 million and convert it to increased charter funding or school voucher programs. Very, very nervous about that because, again, our budget is very tight. We can pay our bills. We can still do good work. We're still trying to be as innovative as we possibly can. But if $28 million in federal funds go away, then that's a very serious problem for our district because if $5 million go away, we have a problem. If $10 million goes away, we have a problem. So we're watching it very closely.
What does it
we're
even look like?
anticipating at least a $500,000 difference than what we initially planned for this year.
Okay.
But in a budget of over $350 million, we can make those kinds of adjustments. But if they were to substantially cut our federal funding, we've cut this budget as much as we can without people feeling it, and trying to minimize the impact on students and teachers when we cut. There's not much left, and the next things that we have to start cutting down on or changing are going to be the things that people notice, and we certainly don't want that to be the case.
So we'll be keeping a close eye on that, and kind of one of the last things I want to talk about, the Achievement First debate. We had Mary Beth Calabro in around Valentine's Day just a few weeks ago delivering the cards to the mayor's office. What do you anticipate seeing happen?
I mean, they've approved it. I'm not against charter schools. I'm not against Achievement First. I think they do a very nice job, and my problem was with the conversation. If they had come to us and said, we want to expand Achievement First, we know it's going to have a significant financial impact because, my financial people tell me it's $169 million over 10 years. Again, it's not like money out of style here in Providence. We need the funds. But if it's another tool in the wheel of an improving school district, because we are improving, not as rapidly as we need to, but we're getting better every year. If it's part of that conversation of working together, then I'm fine with it. But to say, the kids in Providence, you're failing, and the only way you can be successful is we have to create insults. And I actually met with the commissioner today, early this morning, and we talked about that. We talked about how, as a board and as our superintendent, we're willing to entertain any innovative ideas to improve student performance, to improve the quality of education in the city. Charters, increased programming, different education models, changing the programming so that schools have more flexibility. We're open to all those things, and we're here to work together with the state. And so I think going forward, at least the impression I get from our conversation today is that's what you'll be seeing, is a united front between the state and the city working to improve the outcomes for children.
But you mentioned specifically Achievement First, and you said wanting to work more in partnership with the city. How does that look? I mean, it's one thing to say it, but how does that look like in practice?
So part of what we talk to Achievement First is increasing their English language learner population.
Okay.
Working with us, as you know, these newcomers come to us in June, they come to us in April, they come to us in March. Charter schools get their population for the most part in August and September. And we're having trouble finding seats for these people. When they talk about, oh, you need the seat capacity, well, our regular population, our regular education population, we have seats there. We don't have seats in ELL. We don't have seats in newcomer. That's why we're opening up a program. So if they can work with us on that and open up some seats during the year to students that are coming to our district that could be served well by them, now we have partnership. Now we're working together. I think there's a lot of opportunity to do professional development with them, to do some administrator training with them. When you walk through, what you're seeing with the children is not very different than what you see in a Providence school. They may have more resources than we do in terms of technology, but again, you go school by school, you see different things happening than you saw 5, 10, and 20 years ago. I was at again, just to point to Leviton, which is a dual language program. All the students spend 50% of their time learning in Spanish, and 50% of their time learning in English. Going in first grade classes with one-to-one accessibility to technology, every kid working on a laptop. So I think we have to focus on some of the positive things that are going on in the city, because that brings everyone to the table to work together to find solutions within. The solutions aren't more charters. Those are Band-Aids. We have to work for a larger solution.
Well, we'll continue to keep a close eye on that. But I'm glad I had you in today. Again, wanted to talk about sort of the fiscal realities facing the schools. And then, as you mentioned, both at the state and potentially federal level. But, appreciate hearing what you're doing in terms of English language learners and how the schools are, again, looking to work for the infrastructure capacity. Anything else you want to think that viewers should know about and your role here as you're in the studio with us today?
No, I mean, we meet every other Monday. The second and fourth Monday, we welcome everybody to come and let us know what's going on in their neighborhoods and their child's school. We want to hear from the community. We want to hear about the good things. We want to hear about the bad things. And you'd be surprised that we can actually address a lot of the concerns that people have. We have very diligent people now working for us, and so we want the community participation in education.
How many snow days are we up to this year, do you know?
Probably 4 or 5. Probably 4 or 5.
Reaching the limit, huh?
When I was elected president of the board last year in January, and I think we canceled school like 4 times in the first 2 weeks that I was a school board chair. So I would have been very popular with the 10-year-old version of myself back then. But, yeah, my philosophy is, if we can't guarantee that every child that gets on a school bus in the morning gets to school safe, gets home safe in a timely fashion, then we should not have school. Nobody ever gets hurt if that's the case. The 2007 incident with people on buses till 11 o'clock, that can never happen again. So I think if you cancel it, you're always on the safe side. The delays, I think, are tough for families. I heard from a lot of people
yeah,
today.
How does that work? I mean, what do you hear on that?
We had a 2-hour delay.
Yep.
The rationale behind that is we don't want the plows, school buses, and garbage trucks on narrow roads all at the same time.
Okay.
So I think that was their thinking behind the 2-hour delay today. But no one wants to be in school in June either. So unless we rehab our buildings and put air conditioner in, then we'd be all set.
I mean, people have talked about that, looking internationally in other education models. Could you ever see that happening? I mean, not even just here in Rhode Island, but within the country. Do you think that year-round school is something that could ever be on the table?
I think it has to be. I don't think we should be sending kids to school 300 days a year. I'm comfortable with a 180-day school year, but I really believe it should be spread across a 12-month school calendar. 12 months of learning, because when you're looking at the data, it's irrefutable that students are getting to grade level in June, and they're coming back in September worse than where they were the year before. So there's this tremendous summer learning loss. And we try to deal with it with summer programs and tutoring and different options. The mayor's been very focused on summer learning loss and expanding opportunities for kids in the summer. But the only way to do that's 200 kids at a time. We have 25,000. So I do think as a country, we have to consider moving in that direction. I don't think it's feasible to do it one city, one state at a time.
I think it would have to be a whole countrywide decision.
I'm a supporter of a 12-month school calendar.
That would be interesting to see. You know, people talk about. I mean, and so you're supportive. I mean, do you see it being part of the conversation, or do you think it's just something people talk to and say that would be ideal, and then go back to where we're at?
We were selected as one of 6 districts to participate in the Harvard By All Means project, and in those discussions, these are districts from all across the country. Pretty much everybody says, "Oh, this is something that we all think would be helpful." I mean, it's a real problem, summer learning loss. And again, we're not talking about, you wouldn't have the 2 months off in the summer. You'd break that 2 months off over the course of a year. So it wouldn't, again, it's not talking about more work days, different calendar.
Yep.
But you can't do that in schools that are cold in the winter and hot in the summer.
Yes.
So it to me, it has to be a national initiative so we have consistency. But also because the federal government is going to have to help states in modernizing the facilities, particularly in the Northeast, where they tend to be older than the other parts of the country.
Well, we'll see if that ends up ever being part of a broader conversation, but clearly you're supportive of it here. So I want to finish up with you. You do know that we ask folks trivia questions here.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So there's a board game. It's called Day Trip, and it's all Rhode Island trivia, and you're a Rhode Island guy.
Okay, yeah.
Where'd you go to high school?
Classical.
Graduate of classical, class of?
2005.
Okay, class of 2005. So this is a slightly older game. It might be dated a little bit here, but we'll see your knowledge of Rhode Island trivia. So pick a card, any card. Okay, and I'm going to look for questions for you. Okay. Ooh.
I didn't know there was going to be a test.
Yeah, you're in the education world. There might be a test here. Okay, so fill in the blank. Stop at the sign of the blank.
The lemon.
Oh, stop at the sign of the lemon. He got it. I probably would sat there and be like, stop at the sign of what? Like, are we supposed to stop at stop signs?
We roll through stop signs. We stop for lemonade.
Stop for the lemon. Stop at the sign of the lemon. Dell's Lemonade. It's certainly something that's never going to go away anytime soon. Fun Rhode Island trivia that we like to ask folks here. There's a funny question. How do Rhode Islanders typically give directions? By referring to landmarks current and past. I'd like to know who wrote these questions because they're kind of amusing, but it's always fun just to talk about Rhode Island facts and trivia and such with folks who come in. So I appreciate your coming in today.
Appreciate it.
You wear many hats.
I do.
You wear many hats, and we will certainly be talking with you about some other issues around the city in the near future, but appreciate your breaking down things at the school board level. So hopefully if you have anything you want to bring to viewers, come in here and talk with us.
Sure, absolutely.
Any announcements that you want to make either to coming down the road, just give us a call.
Okay.
Okay, Nick Hemond.
Nice
I
to see you.
appreciate it.
Thank
Okay,
you.
folks, that was Nick Hemond, chair of the Providence School Board, talking with us about education issues, funding issues, talked with us about plans that they have to address newcomers, as they call them, English language learners. They have identified a building here in Providence looking to be able to address their needs that way. Of course, talked about the infrastructure needs of the schools, which some have some very significant ones, and also discussed the new education secretary at the federal level and how that could potentially impact here in Rhode Island with her focus on school choice and vouchers, and could that possibly be in play and what that would mean here